This is the unfiltered truth about entrepreneurship. Raw, no BS, no sugarcoating. Welcome to Entrepreneur Intel. I'm your host, Wes Mathews. Each episode, we'll learn from experienced founders and uncover the top 5% learnings that led to their success in all things personal, family, and business. This show is sponsored by Stealth Consulting, delivering clear marketing strategies, ROI, and no surprises. So I'm super excited today. It's amazing that I get to sit here and interview some really cool people, but I'm really excited to have you on today. But at first, I'm going to introduce our guest today. He is a talented entrepreneur whose first company, Lumen Legal, was successfully exited in 2020. He is a two-time recipient of the Inc. 500 award. And I want to stress 500, not 5,000. 500 is a huge deal. That's a big deal. So author of the books Unbound and Legal Visionaries, co-founder of Living Liver Foundation and the Global School of Entrepreneurship. He is also the former global chair of EO organization, which has been a huge part of my life. He's entrepreneur emeritus at the Edward Lowe Foundation in Michigan. That's another great story. Welcome, Dave Galbenski.
Oh, man, I'm so honored to be on, Wes. And thank you for bringing your energy to a podcast to share, entrepreneurial stories, right? I've seen a lot of your sessions, man, and there's some cool entrepreneurs.
Awesome.
So, man, I'm honored to be on, baby. So I can't wait
You're one of the coolest one, right? I always talk about top 5%, bottom 5%. Like, you're definitely in my top 5%. I mean, there's so many other things that I could go on and on about you, but I got to start by asking you. I ask this question to everybody before we get going. You've been an entrepreneur. You've been doing this for about 31 years. Yeah. What's the most important lesson you've learned thus far?
Yeah, wow, that's a great question, right? And I think about it. I started being an entrepreneur when I was, 24 years old, right? Fresh out of law school, figuring out, I'm going to be an entrepreneur, right? And so when I think about that trajectory of a journey, I always think kind of in rules of three, right? Because that's what we remember. And so I'm big into acronyms because I can't keep everything in my head all the time. So I'm going to give it in 3 Ps that I've learned along the way. The first is, if I can align my passion with a purpose and I can put that in the place of most potential, I've increased my odds of success in whatever I do, right? But I think it's ultra critical to entrepreneurial success, whether it's in a for-profit enterprise or some of the stuff I'm doing now in not-for-profit through the Living Liver, is putting it through that filter, right? Because we have finite time for us to make an impact in our own entrepreneurial journey and in our lives. So I'm putting that filter together to say, what am I, passionate about? What is it? How does it align with my purpose inside that entity that I'm creating? And then be very intentional about, where am I placing myself in the place of most potential? And if I align those 3 things, I've increased the odds of success, impact, and of course, if I'm running, an entrepreneurial enterprise, creating enterprise value, community impact, employee engagement. And so that's the filters that I've learned along the way. Didn't have it nailed when I was 24 years old in my mom and dad's basement launching a company with $2,000, right? But that's what I've learned in that journey.
So passion, purpose, placement.
Yep.
Love it. We probably just saved people like 20 years of banging their head against the wall. So talk a little bit about that. So I'm assuming that Lumen Legal, was that the first company? Did you start this in your mid-20s, or was that your first crack at entrepreneurship?
Yeah, and probably like most entrepreneurs, right? I was shoveling snow. I was doing all kinds of stuff on the side as a kid, little gigs, selling T-shirts at college, right? But the first formal enterprise was Lumen Legal. And my passion there, right? I went to law school, undergrad business, but I really didn't have a passion for practicing law, Wes. I did it. I got a law degree, but I realized I was probably going to be a B+ to C+ lawyer, right? And that's just what I aspire to be. So I really started to say, how could I use my legal training aligned around a purpose? And I love the concept of, which became Lumen Legal, is we allowed people to engage in the legal services industry in the way that they wanted. Maybe less than full time was one of our offerings. So we allowed someone to have a different lifestyle. So my purpose was, I was allowing a lawyer to engage in the legal services industry in something different than an all or nothing proposition, which in the 90s was what law was. You were either all in or you weren't able to. And at that time, there was a significant transition, Wes, in the composition of law school classes. It had turned about 50-50 gender-wise, right? And it wasn't a gender play, but then some of our lawyers wanted to, when they were assuming child rearing responsibilities, whether it was a male or female, wanted less than full-time in legal. It didn't exist. So Lumen became a purpose for us to provide those career opportunities for lawyers, whether male or female, that were assuming child rearing responsibilities to engage in law and make a living. So it's early on this fractional, enterprise that has emerged over time. So that was my purpose. My passion was entrepreneurship because I realized I love creating enterprises. And so what I then decided to do is, where's the place of most potential? Well, it was inside an industry like legal that was very backward looking, very regulated, wasn't changing. I'm like, I'm going to put myself there and make a difference. And that's when I started to learn those lessons of passion, purpose, place of most potential that allowed us to scale that company over time.
And how taboo was that in the 90s, right? I mean, you have I'm just assuming, right? Putting on my regular normal hat.
Yes.
There's this path of attorneys, but you're like, nah, I'm going to go this way. And you're talking the 90s.
Yes.
And what you're doing super disruptive. I mean, how many naysayers, how many people thought you were just absolutely nuts? And
they thought it was crazy. They thought it was crazy. They're like, what kind of lawyer would want to work part-time? The quality must be horrible. What are you going to do, right? So it's overcoming all of those objections. And what was amazing, right, is what we see today. Fast forward 30 years, right? When you're like, that's just normally accepted. So we were blazing a trail, educating people, evangelizing it. But what we had was talented, committed lawyers that delivered results. We wouldn't have been successful other than the lawyers we were able to recruit that said, I'm going to make this work. And they worked their tails off to convince others. So they were then blazing the trails for the lawyers today, which I love, as the outcome is they can work whenever, wherever, however, create value for their family and create value for the enterprise they're working for. And again, we've seen it across every discipline. We were just focused in legal, and there were lots of other people blazing the trail with us, but it was neat to be able to create those opportunities for others, as well as create an enterprise that had economic value along the way.
So was it always part of your vision to exit that company? I mean, exiting in 2020, was that always part of the original idea, or that just sort of naturally happened? Or
Yeah. No, that's a great question. So I'll kind of give you my philosophy on building companies that I learned over time is, I think there's always, when you're running a company, whether it's 10, 15, 20 years, there are external economic cycles that will provide opportunities for you to exit, right? It just happens. It's going to go up and down. Capital's going to be available. The economic waves are going to be different. Consolidation is going to happen over time. And what I realized is there were usually waves of 3 to 7 years when there might be a time for us to sell our organization, right? So first 10, 12, 15 years, we had offers to come in. They never were not the right things. We're like, no, it's not the time. But I started to realize that there were cycles, levels of interest, level out. So then as we started to get along the way, I had one intersecting thought that gave me clarity about now is the time to consider exiting and building that enterprise value. And that was an external health issue that I'm free to talk about, which resulted in the Living Liver Foundation, which I began to suffer from a rare autoimmune disease that I knew at some point, whether it was a year, a decade, or several decades, I would need a liver transplant to stay alive. So we got very clear of a time horizon that we needed to exit. And we knew we had probably a couple cycles, but what we wanted to do was be very intentional that when that economic cycle hit us, that we had an enterprise that we felt we could get within 80% of, if you will, maximum valuation. You're never going to exit at the peak, but you're like, here's the number, we could take it to market and exit. And it just so happened as we were moving through that phase, we put in place a 5-year plan in 2016. And then we said, in this timeline, we hope to be able to have the economic wins line up and sell the company. And we did, not knowing that there'd be a pandemic that interceded. But we were in an industry, luckily, because I've had so many peers that were in an industry that was so negatively impacted. And I don't take that for granted. We were in a technology-enabled industry that allowed us to maintain value and get that sale done in the teeth of a pandemic at the same price we had got under LOI on.
Wow. So I want to put on pin in that. Definitely want to unpack that. But the last question I have around Lumen
Yeah,
is Inc. 5000. A lot
yeah,
of associates I know and EO members and entrepreneurs get on the Inc. 5000.
yeah.
The Inc. 500, like that's a big deal. I'm not discounting any
No,
award about
sure.
Inc. 5000, but the Inc. 500 to me, like that is a serious award. Like, what did that mean to you? What was
Yeah.
that process like?
Yeah, that's great. I mean, so we go through mix of emotions, right? When I launched the company, I set targets, and one of them was to get on the Inc. 500. So we earned it 2 years in a row in the early 2000s, and it was a target. We're like, we're going to grow rapidly. That's what we're going to do. We're going to put our mark out there, and we did, and we achieved it 2 years in a row. So the feeling was one of accomplishment, one of we set out on a goal, we did it, exhilarating ride. Fast growth, I realized, is like being on one of the craziest roller coaster rides in the world, right? Because you're outstripping your own leadership capacity. We're outstripping our ability to generate the quality that we wanted. And quite frankly, the biggest risk into that level of growth is we outstripped our cash capacity, right? So we literally, by growing that way, actually put our company at risk, because I didn't understand at that time, which I now know is there's a rate, I don't know exactly what it is, but there's a rate where you put your company more at risk than you should to chase growth. And now I know that I want to always be cognizant of what that is, because when you go through those growth periods, you then it's intoxicating. Let's keep growing. And you're not really realizing, oh my gosh, I'm giving more risk because I'm not backfilling capital, et cetera. So that was the greatest learning of risk, because then we started to take on more risk. I then pivoted 2 years later to go global with an outsourced model from India, because that was the next hottest thing. So we were doing lawyers in the United States. So then I got this hubris of like, I'm an Inc. 500. Let's go global, baby. Let's get some, relationships in India. I traveled to India extensively, vetted partners. We get rolling. And then you're like, managing a global enterprise? Whoa, I don't have the infrastructure, and it's 12 and a half hours difference because India is on a half-hour difference to the U.S. But in certain areas, like, what did I just do? And at that point, made some significant investments, rebranding, doing all kinds of stuff that literally in 2006, a couple years after we had done that, we're in some significant financial distress that was caused by the growth and the ambition that then caused us to go, lesson learned, let's figure this out. And so those things to unpack for your listeners, right, is growth is awesome. If you're chasing revenue, which is the Inc. 5,500, be cognizant that cash burn is there. And even though we're having the success, feeling good, it's a roller coaster ride fraught with increased risk. Know that going in, great goal, but understand those are some of the downsides of that really cool award that I felt very proud of.
No, that's really cool. And like the first thing that jumps out to me in my mind for whatever reason is we're talking about 2006, and I think that's when the iPhone came out.
Yes.
So like
Yeah.
email,
Yes.
fax machines. I mean, we're talking a completely different world
Yes.
at that size and scale. Like it's hard to kind of think about like that size and scale without the type of technology we have.
Yes.
And as you're doing all this, is this while you're the global chair of this huge organization with over 10,000 entrepreneurs globally?
Yeah, what a ride, right? What a ride. So I joined the EO board, the Entrepreneurs Organization Global Board, in 2006, right? So, I'd done the local chapter level. For your listeners that know, you run a local chapter. So I'm in Detroit. So I did forum chair, membership, president, went on the global, and then joined the global board. So I had a 3-year term, which culminated in being chair in 2008 and 2009. The Great Recession. How cool. I'm traveling the globe 20 some odd years during the global Great Recession, trying to run a fast growth business, right? So amazing leadership opportunity, learned a ton, right? But certainly then you're into that next phase of uniqueness, right? And again, since we're talking about entrepreneurial journey, Wes, 2008-9. Wow. Massive Great Recession impacted every business, right? It impacted mine. Two of our customers in Detroit were two of the largest automakers, General Motors and Chrysler at the time. Obviously, a different name today, Chrysler, after mergers. We were a legal staffing and outsourcing company. As an entrepreneur, when you're in that business, you're in essence advancing credit in the form of wages advanced, and you get paid 90 to 120 days later for all the lawyers we had out on assignment with them. Well, for those of you who know, Chrysler and General Motors went bankrupt in 2008 and 2009, and they were two significant customers that we were creditors to, but we were unsecured creditors. And you know what they do with unsecured creditors when you go into bankruptcy? You don't get your bills paid. So we'd advanced literally hundreds of thousands, and it might even have been more than $1 million. I try to blank that out.
Yeah.
that went unpaid, that we already paid our lawyers for, that we never got paid for. So you think about the economic impact that we then were going through at that time, quite stunning, that literally, we were in a significant scenario where we're like, wow, we just lost a ton of money, not through our own fault, that we got to then build on. And so it's just interesting time. So I share that as just the risk we take on as entrepreneurs that we're not even aware of. We're advancing money to the world's largest corporations by taking on the risk. It's a conundrum I'll never understand, but interesting. It's how we run our businesses.
Kind of reminds me of like at the end of the day, you're really not in control of anything.
Nope.
Even I think as entrepreneurs, you talk about cycles, right? When you feel like you're on top of the mountain and boom, things happen.
Yeah.
Like you have a health issue,
Yes.
your two biggest customers, So thinking about that, like, and then in lieu of that, so a couple questions I have around that. You wrote a couple books somewhere throughout that process, which I want to touch on. But the one question I don't want to forget is, to me, you're such an inspirational guy. You're super motivated. Like you are a true entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Do you have any regrets or anything? Like you sold your company. So much of you is probably in that company.
Yeah, sure.
Like we're about 4 years since then. Wow, it's crazy to think it's been 4 years since the pandemic. But just want to get your perspective on that because I think the insight as an entrepreneur, people get offers.
Sure.
When time to sell your baby, but time to cycle. Like, love to hear your share on that.
Yeah, so I'll give you 2 or 3 things that I learned during that sales journey. One is we got approached during that economic cycle or that cycle that we were looking to sell by a single buyer, and we then ended up going through a portion of sale with them and then stopped doing it because we're like, it's not the right match. And then we're like, why would we sell our company that we built over 20 some odd years to someone that knocked on our door without putting together a competitive bid? So that would have been, if we would have gone through with that sale and the terms they were offering, which were decent terms, I'm sure I would have had regrets, okay? So I lay that out because sometimes that's often what happens with us as entrepreneurs. Someone knocks on our door, seems like a great fit, and it could turn out perfectly. For us, it wouldn't have been the right outcome. And then we went through, signed an LOI, went through due diligence, and then quickly said, this doesn't make sense, and we're able to pull out. Then we went through an investment banking process, courted 40 buyers, narrowed it down to 15 that had interest, down to 6 or 7 that made quasi offers, and then 3 that we brought in as management team. And between the terms that we signed for the single buyer to the transaction terms that we signed on, it was a 50% premium in purchase price by simply going through that process. Now, some of it was because we continued to grow and we got a little bit of valuation there, but most of it was because of the competitive bid process. So that is the one learning. So we would have had regret if we would have just sold to the single individual. Then I'll pivot to the emotional aspect of it. That's the financial side, right? Awesome. The emotional side is always one of, how do I take care of our people, ensuring that when we do make the transaction, that we feel comfortable with what our roles are and what we're going to do post-exit. And so there, to me, is some of the issues that we go through psychologically. Loss, grief, going through all those problems. And the question is how quickly we go through those. As a quick start entrepreneur, My wife and I ran the business. I probably went through those stages quicker than Lynn, um, and she may have grieved that a little bit more. Neither one is right nor wrong, but it's going to be an emotional journey of going through that grieving process.
Yeah, you bring up a good point that I forgot to ask. Working with your spouse, did you work with Lynn the entire time through Lumen Legal, or?
Yeah, great question, Wes. So I founded the business with another lawyer in 1993, Mark Adams, who remained a small minority owner all the way through exit. Incredible business partner, lawyer, amazing individual. Um, but I ran the enterprise. He was always a silent partner. I ran the enterprise through 2011, 2012, when Lynn joined the organization after 15 years of working in Fortune 500 companies. Worked at Procter and Gamble in Cincinnati in brand management, and then at General Motors. And then we realized the way we were going to really unlock enterprise value, we got very conversant with EOS terminology, visionary integrator. I was the visionary. Lynn is one of the most amazing integrators. And we started to realize when we saw that terminology, Wes, that that was the ability that if we could get on the same page, bring our skill sets together inside our family enterprise, as opposed to her working in corporate America, kind of double down on the risk,
Yep.
running our own business, we would make that happen. So she joined in 2011, 2012, and then we went on that 8-year run where we got very clear on EOS, put together that strategic, we're going to exit, and she unlocked the value. That's clear.
Yeah.
And that pairing, it, to me, is ultimately so critical. Or I may have the visionary stuff, but just like Roy and Walt Disney, if the two together create so much amazing impact. So the lesson I tell every entrepreneur is find that integrator, whether it's your spouse, whether it's a good friend, whether you don't know them, they unlock the value for us visionaries.
Yeah, and that concept's from EOS. Good book to look at is Traction. What kind of goes in deep about visionary
Yeah.
integrator. As soon as I learned that, changed
Mm.
my mental perspective, changed our business, my partnership with my partner. It was like, oh, we now kind of understand roles and can put ourselves and give us labels, which
Yeah.
completely changed our life. So sell the company in 2020 now. Do you kind of float through COVID, or like
Yeah.
how do you get inspired now? You're part of, Living Liver Foundation.
Yeah.
How do you segue from that event of the
Yeah.
sale and then COVID and into the next kind of phase?
Yeah, so I'll fill in some of the details for the listeners, right? It was probably one of the most intense periods of time, Wes, in 2018, 2019, right? So in 2019, I went on what's known as the transplant list, which means my liver had started to fail to the point where I might need a transplant to stay alive, right? So three things happened in a period of time. um, transplant list that I knew I was going to get a transplant. We were selling the company and COVID hit, right? So one of the most intense periods of times we went through. So I had a transplant surgery November 25th, 2019, literally 3 or 4 months before the pandemic truly hit. We were in the midst of our due diligence process. The beauty of transplant, right, is I could work remotely. I moved through that process, right, was still contributing, to the organization as I was recovering. But that was all happening simultaneously, right? So amazing period of time, lots of lessons learned there. And when you think about it, so we exited July 2020. We signed our LOI on March 16th, 2020. And in the state of Michigan, I know you got a global broadcast, state of Michigan was when a lot of those restrictions were going into place the next day. Hey, we're going into shutdown mode. Here's what's happening. We signed the LOI the day before that happened, and then went through the due diligence process and closed on July 20th, 1 month beyond what they thought, at the same terms and transaction price. Very fortunate. So we then, of course, transitioned as employees to the acquiring company for about 8 months. It was an open-ended position. We chose to leave after 8 months as employees, still maintain some shareholding in the ongoing enterprise that is still growing and scaling. And then we said, what's next? And so that was then when we started to sort out what was next. And I used the same filter that I talked about: passion, purpose, place the most potential. And for me, that passion and purpose was thanks to the generosity of my brother-in-law, Mark, who gave me a portion of his liver. Yes, you can give a portion of your liver when you're alive to save the life of someone else. It regenerates in both of us to full size. Save my life, full size liver. He continues to go on in his life, full size liver. And then I said, passion and purpose. My purpose is I'm alive to pay the gift of life forward. My passion will be honoring Mark and every living donor that is an angel on earth, a hero. And I'm going to put myself in the place of most potential, which was, in this case, launching the Living Liver Foundation with Lynn and paying that forward. So now we're about three things: honoring living donors, educating the public about the power and possibilities of living organ donation, and inspiring others to do the same with one goal. The vision is clear for us. By 2038, we will have eliminated the wait list for kidney and liver in the United States, if not the world, for things that we can control and humans can help us live by giving a living organ donation of a kidney or liver. So that's our goal, 0, so that the 17 people a day in the United States, and it's a global problem, that die waiting for a deceased organ. So you align those three things, and we're having a blast. We launched that on February 14th, Valentine's Day, 2020. It was actually the day that I was listed on the transplant list in 2019, February 14th. So there was some significance to it.
Well, I'm excited for you. I love the date because I know what happens with you when you put goals out there. You tend to hit them. So super excited to kind of watch your journey there. So like, what is that, for part of my ignorance, like I know organs sometimes have to be a match. I mean, is it any liver can go to any recipient, or like talk about
great question.
Selfless gift of your brother-in-law to like give, like talk, I guess a two-part question that, but then like how does that make you feel, like, this, coming out of that?
Yeah, amazing. So I'll start with the feeling first, right? Because that's what we do as entrepreneurs and EOers, right? The feeling is I have never, Wes, been more connected to an individual than my brother-in-law in ways I can't describe, right? Because he's a part of me, I had my transplant from the Motor City. I had my transplant at Henry Ford Health, right? So one of the founders of the automotive company founded an amazing healthcare system where they have a great transplant institute. And so I often say my brother-in-law's last name is Dybus. My last name is Galbenski. So I say, here's what happens. I'm Galbenski, powered by Dybus, and I'm serviced and tuned up by Henry Ford Health. Because what that means is I'm connected to him. We're connected to the healthcare system that makes all of this possible. So I've never felt love. I've never felt more vulnerable. I've never felt more connected than having that experience of a living organ donation, right? And people ask me, Wes, if you could wave a magic wand and make your diagnosis go away from 2013 and this journey that you've been on for 11 years, healthcare journey, and make it go away, would you do it? And I answer emphatically, no.
Wow.
Because I was meant to go on that journey, and I'm living in extra innings, overtime, whatever your special analogy is, with a great trajectory over decades because of what Mark gave to me. It's my obligation to pay that forward, and I wouldn't change it because it's shaped who I am today. And I'm meant here to align my passion and purpose in the place of most potential, which in one area is our Living Liver Foundation. And we're having a blast doing it. Again, just to riff on that passion purpose. I've loved baseball, Wes, since I've been 7 years old, and I walked into my first stadium, right? And so what we're doing is living donor awareness games, where we honor, educate, inspire. And so we've got a neat event coming up here in the near term where we're going to do 3 living donor baseball games at the major league level in 24 hours. The Atlanta Braves, the Cincinnati Reds, and the Philadelphia Phillies, where we'll bring out amazing stories. They'll throw out the first pitch from a living donor to a recipient. Great visual metaphor, right? They're both alive. Dispels the myth that you got to be a deceased organ donor. They're throwing the first pitch. They're active and healthy, right? And so we're using that platform of my passion to deliver my purpose. And where are we putting ourselves? In the place of most potential in a Major League Baseball park with tens of thousands of people there to spread the word about that. So again, using those three things in whatever we do, it amplifies what we're trying to do. So those are the things that I'll stitch together in terms of how I feel connected, how the foundation is then connected to my passion and purpose and what I'm trying to take forward.
That's really cool. I mean, there's so much here, but I just love how entrepreneurs, just how the entrepreneurial brain works. Like, does it ever go off? Like, what do you do to relax, or like, how do you just like take it all in? And you just have such a cool, like, you're just on and you go and you do really awesome stuff, and you know, but like, how do you, like, as a successful guy, I mean, you're one of the most successful people I've ever met in my life. How do you take Dave time? You know?
Yeah, no, it's a great point. So I have other passions, right? So I love golf. I love running. And running is my sacred space, right? Because I think that's where I do my meditation, right? So for me, it's running and taking time to try to stay as physically fit as possible to, you know, honor, number one, my living donor, but give me that mental health space. So I try to do that, right? As much as I can, is to stay fit and keep my mental health there together. And that's probably what I do the most of, is just give some time there and then, you know, enjoy golf, enjoy running, enjoy time with family, and try to manage that and build a life by design. Do I do it perfectly? No. You know, sometimes I'll get out of whack and Lynn will have to say, dude, you're taking on a lot of stuff, man. Your visionary stuff. You gotta stop filling the bucket, baby. And so she's my soulmate and person that really knows, hey, this is when you got to dial it back a little bit. So I think we always need someone in our lives that can tell us the truth of when we may get our visionary a little bit too much leaning into it, and we got to dial it back. And so I'm grateful that I have someone like that in my life that I love and respect, and has the ability to go, Dave, you're a little bit getting out on your skis a little bit, pull it back a little bit. And I think we all need that.
What's really cool for me, like doing the podcast, I've had the opportunity to, like, I've really discovered a lot of entrepreneurs and like their passion and their nonprofit projects, which I really didn't know. You know, I had the opportunity of talking to Chris Lambert. He's doing a lot in Detroit. I just had Maggie Varney from Wigs for Kids.
Awesome.
Out of St. Clair. And now I have you on. And I got to ask, like, what's a good ask, or how can anybody support, help deliver, you know, the Liver Foundation? I'm really interested there.
Yeah, I mean, for us right now, it's, you know, we're all about just spreading awareness. I mean, obviously, if they want to donate, great, but that's not why we do it. It's about spreading awareness around the fact that you can save a life today for kidney and liver, right? And just spreading that knowledge is huge to us, because all we're trying to do in telling stories, Wes, we know storytelling is the key currency, right? If we can tell stories of heroes that are stepping forward, that may inspire someone to think about it. The minute we plant a seed and they think about it, it becomes a possibility. And that's all we want, is because we know there are heroes out there that go, I could do that. I'm fit. I'll find a match, whether it, you know, and again, you'd ask the question, how do you have a match? You know, on the liver side, you got to have blood type match. You got to have an anatomical match of the size of liver and how it hooks up. And you got to go through a battery of tests, and then they make sure it all fits together. But people could do it. So the best way is just to, number one, be aware that you can donate a kidney and a liver. Find stories that you can tell, and then ponder it. Is that what you think you could do for someone else? Because we're seeing a lot of heroes stepping forward and doing it. And it's the most amazing gift people give. And here's what we find out. When we talk to living donors, Wes, they say it's actually changed them for the better. They're actually grateful that they went through it. Their mental health is better. Their outlook on life is better. Their physical fitness is better. They're all of that because they trained to become a living donor. And they're like, I can't believe it. This is amazing. It enhances their life, which is what I'll call that unintended, beautiful consequence of their gift, not expecting anything in return. But that's the universe giving back to them, in them going, wow, I feel great because I did it. And that's almost universal for living donors. That's what they say. They report a higher level of life satisfaction because of what they did.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it seems like, as you're talking about this, I'm racking my brain. Like, I've never really heard of the concept in front of me. Out of all the content and media I see, I don't really see anything.
Exactly.
So I'm super excited on your mission and excited to watch you get there along the way. But I also, before I want to talk a little bit about GSCA,
Yeah.
because for me, again, I think it may be listeners, maybe to the podcast,
Yeah,
took a very unconventional route, right? So
it is.
all my friends went away to 4-year schools. They all had really fancy degrees, and their parents are like, "You need to be a doctor and a lawyer." And I kind of went down this like path, and the path of like 4 or 5 years for community college, and I kind of always knew I'd be an entrepreneur. A lot of naysayers, but I think what you're doing on GSCA is really
Yeah.
amazing. I'd love for you to share the passion there.
Oh man, I love to. Again, lines, passion, purpose, place of most potential, right? Right along with living liver. So what we're doing there with the Global School of Entrepreneurship, it's disruptive, digital, MBA education that's accredited, man. And here's the deal. It's by entrepreneurs, for entrepreneurs, with entrepreneurs. So it doesn't get any better than that, man. It's pure pureness. And what we're doing is we are able to deliver in a 18-month to 2-year experience an accredited MBA in a cohort model of 8 to 10 other peer entrepreneurs in a live lecture series that checks all the boxes of accredited MBA. So someone is getting exposure to the same type of concepts, the same type of learning styles as anyone that would go to any other digital MBA program or on-campus program. But we're doing it with other entrepreneurs in a small cohort that we view it as what we call catalytic learning. We're feeding that content in that then the entrepreneurs get to discuss. How does it apply to their business? So theory catalyzes their discussion. How do we apply it to an entrepreneurial enterprise? And we do it in a way that an entrepreneur can consume it. It's online, so they can do it when they're running 60, 70 hours a week. They're doing it with other entrepreneurs, so they're getting their juice from other entrepreneurs in a nice small cohort. And we stretch it out over an 18 to 24-month period, kind of one class a month. There's homework pre, homework post. It's pass fail. Doesn't matter. Learn the content, demonstrate proficiency. Doesn't matter, are you A, B, or C? And we do it in what's known as the Oxford tutorial model, which is you discuss it and then you reflect on it to demonstrate your proficiency. 13 classes that fit all the categories of an MBA, from leadership to marketing to accounting to finance, but in an entrepreneurial way. And then the last third, after those 13 classes, is called a capstone. And you get to work on something that's relevant to your business, which is the last third or 30 credits of the business, independently, or bring in your peers, or work with your leadership team to develop something that's critical for the business. Or maybe you're launching a new enterprise, and then you can build that capstone. I'll give you an example. One of our first graduates was building a new real estate development business, and he was going to need a replicable sales process. So his capstone was developing the sales playbook, all of it. So he spent his last 30 credits demonstrating proficiency in how do you sell, right? What do you do? And he put it in a playbook that then he was going to hand off to a sales team and scale his company. So those are the very practical ways that we've redesigned it. And we sit on a very disruptive university platform called Wolf, WOOLF University. And they have raised tons of VC money. They're disrupting the entire education industry. And they've got some of the most amount of students that they're delivering through their platform. And Global School of Entrepreneurship sits on top of it. And we derive that curriculum. We've got all the regulatory and compliance handled. And you walk out of there with an accredited MBA akin to any brand name, because it's accredited in Europe, in the US. And then it opens up, Wes, all these cool opportunities. And one for a lot of entrepreneurs, Wes, is the ability to take that MBA and gain entrance back to traditional academia to teach an entrepreneurship class at community college or otherwise.
Yeah, I love it, right? Because again, it took me like 4 or 5 years to get through community college. So goes to my next question, which is, what's the prerequisite? I mean, like, I've been an entrepreneur for 15 years.
Yeah.
I've thought about going back to but I got to get I got to do all these things, and there's all this red tape. Like, what are the requirements for an entrepreneur to go through this program?
Yeah, great. So what's interesting is there in the accreditation process, there's the ability for someone to demonstrate proficiency if they've been in an entrepreneurial enterprise or leadership position for 7 years, that they could enter our MBA program without an undergraduate degree. And that's anywhere, right? I mean, that's just not our enterprise. So if you're running an entrepreneurial enterprise and you've been 7 years, that can count for your undergraduate degree to gain admission to an MBA program. And so people can enter that way. Of course, the traditional way, if they have an undergrad, they flow right in. But that's a unique thing for a certain subset of entrepreneurs that are attracted to our program, because we're able to take the school of hard knocks, 7 years running an enterprise, and go, that's equivalent to earning an undergraduate degree to get you into the MBA program. So that's a unique way to get in. And then I'll talk a little bit, Wes, about what we'll call our avatars, right? The people that are seeking it, that are entrepreneurs, and why they're seeking an MBA program like we're delivering. And that is, we hit on it, someone that is highly successful as an entrepreneur, hasn't completed undergrad, but wants that advanced degree. That's one area. The second is, I think we all suffer from it to a certain extent, imposter syndrome. We may not have the external credentials as someone else, and boy, wouldn't it be great to have that comma MBA after our name to show, hey, we know we're a good business person, right? So we see that as well. And then there's this, man, you know what? I really want, for my own personal fulfillment, for whatever reason, to demonstrate that I can achieve something academically, because maybe a lot of entrepreneurs just never liked traditional academia, but boy, they would love to know that I can succeed if the academic institution was designed for how I learn and how I get together and how I show up. Because what we know is traditional academia is designed for a certain type of learner to succeed there. And a lot of times that doesn't overlap with the personality of entrepreneurs. So instead of adapting the entrepreneur to an academic enterprise, we're adopting, what you do is the academic institution to the entrepreneur. And that's the secret sauce to address those. And that's why we're excited about bringing it to entrepreneurs.
No, I'm super excited as I think about it. I just remember back and I knew I was a visionary and everybody else is an integrator. Like if you're good at school and you're smart, you're an integrator. But the disruptive, the class clowns, the ones that are like, we don't know about that one. Those are usually
they're like, we don't know about that Mathews guy, man. He seems really bright, but he's caused a lot of problems in our class.
And yeah, I got to touch on the last thing too. I mean, you have so much here, which is awesome. Like, what is the Entrepreneur Emeritus at Edward Lowe Foundation? Like, what does that mean to you?
Yeah. Well, it's another give back, right? I've gone on the journey. How can I share my experience with the next generation of entrepreneurs? That's the goal of that title. It sounds fancy. It's just me giving back. And they gave me a fancy title because I've been there, done it, right? But the Edward Lowe Foundation is based in Michigan. It's kind of one of the best kept secrets for second stage companies, which means companies that are between 1 million and 50 million, 10 employees and 99 employees, that sweet spot where a lot of us entrepreneurs reside. And it's a great story. Edward Lowe of the Edward Lowe Foundation invented kitty litter, a whole industry, in 1947. He came up with clay as an absorbent. When people used to use sawdust and cats were living outdoors, he said there's got to be a better way, because people would bring sawdust in their boxes in the house. Cats would track around sawdust and they're like, this is crazy. He came up with an absorbent clay, found it. Then he went barnstorming around the country, dropping off bags of clay, as he said it. And then, of course, he innovated, made it happen, built it to an amazing enterprise, sold it to a major pet care company. And then he donated the vast majority of his wealth to form the Edward Lowe Foundation to help second stage entrepreneurs. And so I'll go out there, facilitate retreats. They've got a suite of programming to help second stage entrepreneurs. And it's a fun resource. But the guy invented kitty litter. What a story. And he's given it back to help other entrepreneurs be with other entrepreneurs.
What a great story. Well, Dave, thank you so much. I am so honored to have you here. The main things that stick out, Living Liver and GSCA. If anybody listening wants to reach out to you, how can people connect with you?
Yeah, so I'm on all the social media platforms, LinkedIn, Facebook, etc. If they want to hit an email, last name's Galbenski @gmail.com. That's GALBEN skai@gmail.com. Reach out. Love to connect, man. It's awesome to be with other entrepreneurs.
Awesome.
And thanks for the great work you're doing, man. Thanks for having me on. I'm going to listen to your podcast now and forevermore, man, because you get great guests on. And I hope everyone else that's seeing this hit subscribe, because this needs to get out there. Not my session, but who else you got going out there. They need to see who you got coming on, because you got rock stars coming on, I know, given your network.
Awesome, man. Well, hey, Dave, thanks again, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
We'll see you later. This has been another episode of Entrepreneur Intel. Thank you for joining us. For show notes or other episodes, please visit us at entrepreneurintel.com. Until next time.